Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will be looking at Asch's 1951 and 1955 conformity studies which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of social influence. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Asch conducted 2 studies into conformity. Asch, 1951, Conformity Study. Asch, 1955, Factors that Affect Conformity Study. Asch's 1951 Conformity Study. Asch aimed to investigate whether social pressure from a majority group could affect a person's conformity rate in an unambiguous situation when an obviously wrong answer was given to a simple question by other members of the group. Asch conducted a laboratory study using 123 American male college student volunteers from Swarthmore College in the USA, who believed they were taking part in a test of vision. The naive participants were each placed with 6 to 8 Confederates, actors who were in on the experiment, and shown a stimulus line and 3 other lines labeled A, B or C, and asked to match the length of a single line to one of 3 comparison lines. They were then asked one by one to say out loud which of the 3 sets of lines matched the stimulus line. The naive participant was placed second to last or last when giving a response, and the Confederates were instructed to give the incorrect answers on 12 out of 18 trials, critical trials. The results were compared to a control group in which no Confederates were used. Asch found that on the critical trials, 36.8% of the participants, over a 1/3, conformed to the clearly incorrect majority. 75% of participants conformed at least once during the experiment. 25% of participants never conformed. 1% of incorrect answers were genuine mistakes. 0.7% of participants gave incorrect answers in the control group. Most participants said they conformed to avoid rejection, NSI, and continued to privately trust their own opinions, compliance. Asch concluded that people are likely to conform to group opinions even when they are clearly wrong, due to the pressure to fit in, normative social influence. Asch noted this as something called the Asch effect, the tendency for people to sometimes do what others do rather than what they feel to be right. Asch's 1955 Factors that Affect Conformity Study. Asch aimed to investigate whether certain factors affect a person's conformity rate. Asch found 3 factors to affect conformity rates: group size, unanimity, and task difficulty. To investigate group size, Asch varied the number of Confederates between 1 and 15 to see how group size influenced conformity. Asch found that with just 1 Confederate, conformity dropped to 3%, with 2 Confederates conformity dropped to approximate 13%, and with 3 Confederates, conformity was 32%. Any more Confederates made little difference to the conformity rate. Therefore, group size does affect conformity rates, as when the majority group size increases, so does conformity, but only to a certain point. Unanimity is the extent to which members of the majority agree with one another. To investigate this, Asch introduced a truthful Confederate or a Confederate who was dissenting but inaccurate to observe the effects of breaking unanimity. When one Confederate was instructed to give the correct answer throughout, the rate of conformity dropped to 5%. When one Confederate gave a different incorrect answer to the majority, the rate of conformity dropped to 9%. Therefore, unanimity does affect conformity, as when a naive participant had support for their beliefs, it was easier to resist the pressure to conform, and if the group's unanimous position was broken or disrupted, regardless of whether the answer was correct or incorrect, then conformity was reduced, as both enabled the naive participant to behave more independently. To investigate task difficulty, Asch made the line judging task more difficult by making the stimulus line and the comparison lines more similar in length to see if increased difficulty would lead to higher conformity. Asch found that when the task was made more difficult and the correct answer became less obvious, conformity rates increased. Therefore, task difficulty does affect conformity, as when the task becomes more difficult and participants are more unsure of the correct answer, conformity rates are higher. Asch's studies have several strengths and limitations. A strength of Asch's study is that it has increased knowledge and understanding of conformity. Asch's study provided a deeper sight into conformity. This has helped avoid mindless destructive conformity. This convincing argument can help justify the naive participants being deceived into thinking that the Confederates were simply genuine participants like themselves. This is a strength because this suggests that the study design effectively captured the real-life social pressures and behaviors that individuals may encounter in group settings, enhancing the study's relevance and applicability to everyday situations. A strength of Asch's study is that it highlighted the power of social influence on individual behavior. The study demonstrated how the presence of a majority opinion can lead individuals to conform, even when they know the answer is incorrect. These findings shed light on the impact of group pressure on decision-making and the willingness of individuals to go along with the group to avoid standing out or being judged. This is a strength because it suggests that the study effectively showcased the significant impact of social influence on individual behavior, illustrating how group pressure can sway decision-making and prompt individuals to conform to avoid standing out or facing judgment. A strength of Asch's study is that it uses experimental methodology. Asch used a standardized procedure. In each condition, only one of the participants was a naive participant, the rest were Confederates. This allowed Asch to systematically study how real participants would conform to the group's incorrect judgments. Asch's study should therefore have high control over extraneous variables, which should allow for a cause and effect relationship to be established, as when using a laboratory experiment the researcher can be more confident that the Confederates' answer is causing the DV participants' answer. This is a strength because it suggests that there is more confidence that Asch's findings were not affected by extraneous or confounding variables. A strength of Asch's study is that Asch's study enabled theories to be constructed. Asch's findings led to the development of explanations and theories about conformity, e.g., that people will conform to group pressure to avoid ridicule, normative social influence. This has had huge explanatory power in everyday situations and helps psychologists to identify why particular people display particular behaviors. This is a strength because it suggests that these theories derived from Asch's findings offer valuable explanations for behaviors observed in everyday situations, providing psychologists with a framework to understand and analyze human behavior influenced by social pressures. A strength of Asch's study is that it can be replicated. Asch used a line judgment task, 6 to 8 Confederates and a naive participant, who were then asked to choose a line that was the same length as the controlled line, with the naive participant being seated in order either last or second to last every time. This procedure is easy for other psychologists to repeat to test if the results of Asch's study are reliable and valid. This study can also be repeated with different variables such as testing different cultures, genders, and ages. This is a strength because it suggests that researchers can verify the findings and apply them to different contexts, increasing the study's credibility and relevance across various populations and settings. A limitation of Asch's study is that it lacks population validity. The sample consisted of college students. Students often care more about what others think of them compared to the older generation, and therefore are more likely to be affected and influenced by social pressures. This is a limitation because it suggests that the findings of the study cannot be generalized to the wider population and the older generation who may be less worried about fitting in. A limitation of Asch's study is that it suffers from gender bias. The sample consisted of males only. Netto, 1995, suggested that women might be more conformist, possibly because they are more concerned about social relationships and being accepted. An all-female group or mixed group do both males and females might have a different result outcome to the results gained from Asch's study. This is a limitation because it suggests that the findings of the study cannot be generalized to the wider population and other genders, e.g. women. A limitation of Asch's study is that it suffers from cultural bias. The sample consisted of participants from the USA. The USA is an Western country which has an individualist culture. Smith and Bond, 1998, suggest that conformity rates are higher in collectivist cultures, e.g. China, which are more concerned with group needs. This is a limitation because it suggests that the findings of the study cannot be generalized to the wider population and other cultures, e.g. China. A limitation of Asch's study is that his study lacks temporal validity. Asch's findings have been criticized for being a child of the times. Perrin and Spencer, 1980, found just one conforming response in 396 trials. Participants, UK engineering students, felt more confident measuring lines than Asch's original sample, so were less conformist. The 1950s have been classed as a conformist time period of McCarthyism with specific social norms and pressures. People were scared to stand out or be different and therefore, were much more likely to conform. As society has changed a lot since then and individuality is becoming more acceptable and therefore, individuals may feel freer to express themselves without fear of social rejection or disapproval and aren't so worried about fitting in. This limitation because it suggests that Asch's findings may not be consistent across time or may accurately reflect current behavior due to evolving social dynamics, and highlights the impact of changing societal norms on conformity levels. A limitation of Asch's study is that it could be affected by demand characteristics. The participants in Asch's study were volunteers. Volunteers are often more eager and enthusiastic to participate in and are more confident overall to get involved in the research. This could have affected the way the participants behaved during the study, as only a particular type of person would have put themselves forward to become involved in the research process. On top of this, as the study was a laboratory study, participants were well aware they were being monitored. They may have adjusted their behavior and displayed demand characteristics and answer how they think researchers wanted them to answer. This is a limitation because it suggests that there is a chance that the participants may have altered or changed their behavior during the study to fit the way they thought the researcher, Asch, expected them to behave, further suggesting that the results gained from this study are invalid and not indicative of how people would respond in real-life situations. A limitation of Asch's study is that it broke ethical guidelines. Participants were deliberately deceived about the true nature of the experiment, as Asch told participants that they were taking part in a vision test and not an experiment on conformity. This also means that the participants were unable to give informed consent to participate in the study. However, it could be argued that Asch's experiment required deception in order to obtain valuable and valid results. If the participants knew the true aim of the experiment, then it would be likely that the participants would consciously or unconsciously change their behavior, demand characteristics, to match the aim of the experiment, and therefore conducting the study would be pointless as the results gained would not be reliable or valid. A limitation of Asch's study is that it lacks control of extraneous variables. The study was conducted in a group setting, where individual differences, e.g. personality traits and external factors, could have influenced the results, e.g. McGee and Teven, 1967, found that students who were unaffiliated, people who care more about being liked and have a greater need for social relationship, were more likely to conform, and therefore the desire to be liked underlies conformity for some people more than others. This limitation because it suggests that the presence of individual differences could have influenced the participants' behavior in Asch's study. By acknowledging these variations, it becomes apparent that not all participants may conform solely due to the influence of group pressure but rather due to their inherent characteristics and motivations, such as the desire to be liked and maintain social relationships. A limitation of Asch's study is that it lacks mundane realism. Asch's test of conformity, a line judgment task, is an artificial task, which does not reflect conformity in everyday life. The line task was trivial, so there was no reason not to conform. Also, the naive participants were in a group, but not like groups found in everyday life. In everyday real-life situations, the consequences of conforming can be substantially more serious, meaningful, and important, and therefore people are not likely to think about their decisions. Furthermore, in real-life situation a person is more likely to interact with groups more directly, e.g. why people may start smoking or drinking around friends. This is a limitation because it suggests that the findings of this study do not generalize to everyday situations where consequences of conformity are important, and where people interact with groups more directly. A limitation of Asch's study is that it lacks ecological validity. Asch's study was conducted in a controlled laboratory setting, which doesn't mirror the complexities and nuances of social interactions in natural environments. The controlled setting could have influenced the participants to behave differently than they would in their daily lives. This is a limitation because it suggests that result of the study cannot be generalized to real-world scenarios, as the results do not accurately reflect how people would behave in a real-world setting due to the artificial nature of the environment. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.